Welcome to the Outstanding Women Leaders Podcast, or OWLS.
We give a hoot.
I'm your host, Kristen and Katie, a former journalist turned young stroke survivor, accompanied by my resilient and quirky co-host, Katie Eads, who, like a cat, has 9 lives when it comes to careers and relationships. Girl, really quick, introduce yourself.
I love watching our guests' reaction every time you say I have 9 lives when it comes to careers and relationships. It's awesome. Thank you so much for that great introduction. I do have 9 lives. I am currently 37, divorced, and no longer unhinged because I've met a real human in a real place.
It's a real man.
It's a real man just for me. Of course, the month I fall in love, God unleashes a plague on the world. That sounds about right. I am a former high school history teacher by trade, so I am a nerd. You'll have to know that about me. All my jokes are dad jokes. I want to give a shout out to my dad for all those jokes. I'm also a former CrossFit gym owner, so clearly I'm a badass. Former executive director of a nonprofit where I met Veronica. And currently work for another nonprofit and run OWL Professional Coaching. Some people flip houses, I flip careers. What's my next career, you ask? Currently not sure, but if Netflix is listening, I would like my own comedy special. Mom's dead, dad's gay now, I'm still funny. But enough about me. In this podcast, we hope to inspire you to be your bold, brave, authentic self, and also to make a difference in your community.
And be an owl and give a hoot.
Today's guest, Veronica Manning, is the currently executive director at the Jubilee Center. She has a long history of nonprofit, working both on the foundation side and on the nonprofit side. She has just finished her master's at NYU. Woo! Congrats.
Yes, girl.
Badass mother of 2, and she is quickly approaching the wise owl status of turning 50. And so Veronica brings an amazing perspective today. And if you're ready to laugh, feel the presence of faith in your life, and hear the F-bomb a few times, then let's get started. Here we go.
Katie, today's guest superpower is vulnerability, which we love. So I'd like to get started by asking you, is there a time you felt uncomfortable being vulnerable? And when was that time?
Vulnerability. So when I was first talking to Veronica about vulnerability and she said that was her superpower, I'm like, oh, I think it's my kryptonite. It makes me feel really uncomfortable. I did not, my vulnerability would be like showing that emotion with someone. I did not grow up in a home where I ever saw mom cry. Mom was a tough cookie. And I'm sure mom had a lot of times where she broke down, but I never got to see that. And so that's very hard for me. So I have dated my fair share of men who've made me cry, but they've never seen me cry, damn it. Well, maybe one or two. And so, yeah, that really makes me feel uncomfortable. What about you, Kristen?
This entire last year, recovering from stroke and a brain injury, I've had to be nothing but vulnerable. And that's something that's very uncomfortable for me because usually I'm like the woman who like does it all, doesn't need help, like organizing everything. And so having to stop and be like, okay, do you really need help right now? Who can you ask? And having to be vulnerable with like close friends. So that was a little bit easier because I have a really good group of girlfriends here that were literally with me in the hospital while I was recovering from a stroke. So that made it a little bit easier to know that they've kind of known my journey. What's really uncomfortable for me is having to explain something to somebody new and being like, hey, like, can you please bag these groceries? Cause I can't, cause my hand. And they're like, what happened to your hand? I couldn't open my dog's medicine probably like a month ago. My hand has come a long way, but I couldn't open it. And I was like, I have to give her this. I'll just go by the elevator and see if there's a neighbor there. And there was, and I was like, hey, do you mind opening this? And he's like, sure. I'm like, I don't want to be like, oh, my hand is half paralyzed because then I got to go into the stroke story. So I just told him that my wrist is sprained. And then I saw him like last week walking his dog. He's like, how's your wrist? I was like, huh? I'm like, oh, yeah. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's healing. It's fine. I rarely lie, but I just felt like it's just easier for me to be like,
yes,
I broke finger.
That was me when I got divorced. Everyone's like, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm totally fine. I didn't tell a single person I'm having a mental breakdown. My business partner's stealing my business from me. I held $90 to my name. I'm living with my parents. I just cried last night. I didn't tell a single person.
Yeah. Sometimes it's easier just to, but being vulnerable is something I've had to do this past year. That was really forced to do.
I probably would have benefited from just letting a couple people know, hey, I'm having a hard time.
Right.
I can't get through the day without having a mental breakdown. Yeah.
Mm.
But no, I ran away from that vulnerability and I just did it all myself, which is probably why I had the mental breakdown.
It's hard to let people in and let them see you're ugly, because that's ugly. Being vulnerable isn't always pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look at me. I'm like, ew, it's gross. I don't like it.
I think that has a lot to do with how we're socialized, right? I mean, because we're socialized in an environment that says you have to be strong and it's capitalism and dog eat dog and you have to be the best, that's
Mhm.
vulnerable is to admit weakness. And that's not incentivized in any real way. Hardly anybody gets successful or goes to the top of their field by admitting weakness. So it's kind of stamped out of us probably at an early age. I'm sure all three of us could think of times when we were kids where we cried and someone said, don't cry, suck it up, you know, da da da. And we're not men, but even though we're girls, we're still told that we shouldn't cry. That should not be the first response to anything. So that's like ingrained in us from children. So naturally and understandably, we are adults who still struggle with showing weakness. And then add to that with what you now have as a disability, right? There's a stigma around disability and stereotypes, because someone who looks like you, it's hard for people to think that they're disabled in any way, right? You're not running around in a wheelchair, you're pretty, you know, so there's this idea that you can't possibly be that disabled because of how you look, and that you might be lying to get over because you're pretty. Like there's all these assumptions that people might make. And that's why I understand you not wanting to have to tell the stroke story every time, because it's like, it's exhausting, right? Because then people are like, is that really true? Or you never know. And I think because I am so sensitive to other people's judgments, I make up whole entire conversations that the person is having about me in their head that they're probably not even having. Do you know what I mean? Like I've come up with all these things they're probably thinking about me, and I have to stop myself from doing that.
People in general don't understand vulnerability, and they do not understand brain injury. I have an injury that nobody can see.
Exactly.
Nobody knows what's going on. I mean, even sometimes when I wake up and I took my dog out for a walk, like the sun like immediately starts to give me a migraine. And like I was like, should I cancel the podcast? I'm like, I push through it just because people don't understand. Like, you look fine. Yeah, I look fine, but you have no idea what's going on in here. What's painful today?
Yeah.
Most importantly, your eyebrows are on fire today, girl. Your eyebrows are looking good.
Thank you. It's Mexican. But if you get close here, the unibrow, the Frida's coming in. We need to take care of this.
Okay.
It's awful.
Don't worry, we're not in HD yet. It's fine.
It's not good. That's thankful. And my mustache. Lord Jesus.
I mean, can we just take a second to talk about how badly we all need waxed?
I need waxing everywhere.
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 But, you know, I would like to add a couple of things to my bio, because, you know, Katie, we talked about this yesterday, is I like to get away from this idea that I am my work, that my identity is my job. So if I were to say I am, I try not to put my job at the end of that sentence. Like I work as an executive director, but I am a complete weirdo. I'm a nerd. I'm a creative person. I'm a writer. I'm a singer. You know what I mean? Like
that's why we're friends.
I've got to attach my creative output to my identity versus what I get paid to do for work. Does that make sense?
I love that you said
100%.
That is exactly why I joke about all my careers. All of my careers have a similar thread. I'm just choosing where I want to express that.
Exactly.
And in being a teacher or a nonprofit, you never want to get to the point where you're just collecting a paycheck for too long.
Totally.
Right? You get to the point where you're collecting your paycheck and you need to have a plan to move on and take that same passion. And so I maybe have a little bit of the ADD, but that's not why I've had all the careers I've had. I've gotten to a point where the government is the problem with education. So I'm out. I can't fix that. You know, you have to know when to hold them and when to fold them, right?
Yes, Kenny Rogers.
Yes, and that is how I feel about careers.
But my goal in life, and this is very controversial for anyone to say, is my goal is to not work. I don't want to work. And like for someone to say that, you say that, it makes company people look at you like, you don't want to work, you're just lazy, you want to be lazy? Yes, I want to be lazy. I want to not work. I want to live and enjoy my life. That's my goal in life.
Make money and retire. It's a great goal.
Yeah, Katie and I talk about this all the time. Like, we're going to launch this podcast. We're not going to work. This is what we're going to do. Like, that's the goal. But I love what you're talking about. People identify with work so much and it becomes who they are and they become so unhappy. That's kind of in the transition I'm in right now. So I've left my broadcast anchor position and I've been on television for 10 years. And it's like, it's so hard to think like, oh, I'm not going to be on TV anymore. And my dad has been the one that's like, Christy, you are not what you do. And every morning I'm like, you are not what you do, especially in the moments where it's hard, right? It's like, I can't believe that career is over. But, I want to inspire people and help others. That's what I want to identify with, not with being on television. Like, that's so dumb.
Oh, you said broadcast anchor. I thought you said broadcast anger. I was like, that's a great way to describe it.
Oh.
Like my broadcast anger position. That's what I thought. That's why I laughed.
It's the position you get after being the broadcaster. They leave you with broadcaster anger. That's what
100%. I know so many people in the business that has broadcast anger.
I imagine. So Veronica, I love to hear that because I didn't really want to talk about your job anyways, because it's just such a sliver of who you are. It shows your heart because you're in this nonprofit space. But we just talked about reinventing ourselves. And I think right now, as we're looking at what's the post-corona world look like, a lot of people are starting to think about, for the first time in their lives, maybe at 40, 50, 60, 30, reinventing themselves. And all three of us have done it a few times. Veronica, you as Approaching the Wise Owl have certainly done it more than us. What does that look like for you as you enter this year of reinvention?
So I think of it, and I was even thinking about it a little more after you and I kind of pre-talked about it. To me, it's really about finding the best way to live in the now, right? Because a lot of times we hold on to who we were in the past and try to force it to still exist in what is the new reality. Like if your entire identity is to be a club owner, are you struggling? You're struggling right now because you don't own a club. Your club is closed, right? No one's coming to party. So how do you reinvent yourself in the now? So if I go look back through my career path, my first ever job, I worked at McDonald's as a drive-through person. I've worked as a cleaner in an office building. I've worked as a stripper, made really great money. I worked as an executive assistant in an office, and then I worked in a foundation, and I've waiting tables. I've been a theater singer, actor, dancer. I've done musical theater. I produced a film. I was a filmmaker for a few years. So I went to a film festival as a producer in London of a short film that I produced. I've been an actor, been in play. So I've consistently and constantly reinvented myself based on what my needs were at that moment. So when I was in my acting and filmmaking career, I stopped doing that because I needed to have health insurance. So I went into corporate work because I needed to have that access. I had children that needed a health insurance and steady income. So now that my children are adults, they're 24 and 22, I'm looking for my next reinvention of a life that only serves me and what I want to do, my whims, my desires. I haven't been able to only think about myself for a good almost 30 years. Even before I had kids, I had a husband or a man that as a 20-something-year-old, you know how we do. We give ourselves totally.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Ourselves a chameleon to fit what the man wants. So therefore, probably I've never just thought about myself. I mean, I have a husband right now, but I'm not allowing that to factor into my decisions about my own life. And I even just reminded him this morning that, hey, just so you know, the decisions I'm going to be making about my life are only going to be for me. Like you can join in if you want, but I'm choosing for me. And that's an exciting place to be in. And I think what I had said to you, Katie, before is that reinventing yourself is also about peeling away the layers over time of the masks that we keep wearing. And as we grow older, hopefully we can peel them away more. And I always say that when I'm in my 60s and 70s, you won't be able to tell me anything. I'm going to be wearing leather every day. I will be doing whatever I want. I will be lecturing people on all that I know. I mean, I'm looking forward to sort of owning that old wise lady. I'm not afraid to age. Like, I'm excited about having that cachet and that sort of like reverence of, oh, she's been around for 70 years. That's right, my loves. I can tell you what I've seen.
I love that.
You know what I mean? Like, I want to be that
Veronica
wearing
is holding
collars,
court in her old age.
high collars on my every shirt. The collars.
Veronica, can you talk a little bit about the masks you've worn and what are the different masks you've worn?
You know, I was always such a people pleaser and a chameleon that I was wearing whatever mask anybody wanted me to wear, right? If a guy wanted me to be into sports, I learn everything about sports and I want to sit and watch football with you and say everything that you're saying, or even just the mask of like, not being afraid. That's kind of this fake mask of, well, I'm not afraid of anything, or a mask of, it's like it's so many things. It's just pretending to be what I'm not, or hiding that I'm vulnerable, or hiding that I don't know what to do. Even as a boss right now, sometimes I wear the mask. I feel like an imposter sometimes. Like I don't really know what to do. You know, coronavirus shut down the whole organization. I don't know what to do, but I can't say that to my staff. I have to have a staff meeting and say, all right, we're going to reassess and we're going to figure this out. And inside I'm just like, what the hell do I do now? You know? So even having to wear that mask of a leader, that's a heavy burden. And I am learning and have been very always honest with my staff when I don't know, and I ask them for their collective brain power. Like I allow my staff to tell me what they think, and I use that in my decision making. So it's all of those things. Even wearing the mask of a nice person. Sometimes I don't want to be nice, and I feel like I have to be extra nice, especially when it comes to like sexism. Like one moment sticks out of my mind. I was on the train once, and I asked this guy for the time, and he was really rude to me and called me a bitch. And in that moment, I just like smiled and and later I was so angry at myself because I wished I had said something back or said, don't call me that or don't speak to me that way. But I didn't stick up for myself, and I kept that sort of nice girl mask on in that moment, and even other moments when men have said things that were, not so kind to me as a woman. So it's all of that. It's like there's all this stuff. I probably got way off of the question.
No, that stuff is so heavy.
Yeah, it's The Curse of the Good Girl. I don't know if you guys have read this book. It's a great book, right? You're like, yes. The Curse of the Good Girl. Yeah, we are raised to be good and sweet and kind. Every time I order a cup of coffee, they ask me if I want sugar. I'm like, nope, I'm sweet enough. This is how I was raised. When I went to my coactive fundamentals class, they gave us archetypes. It was a fun game to play. I want to play it with you guys because I feel like, Veronica, you have like this great archetype. And for me, my archetype is Katniss, where I'm super sweet and kind, but sometimes I will kill you to survive. I'm working on being better at that. I feel like I used to be much more cutthroat. And then, I don't know, I got a little humbled with some divorce and I'm like, I'll be nice to everyone.
God will humble you. It's really like,
well,
humbling.
But I'll tell you what, when I stood up for myself and I was like, fuck you, buddy, when this guy almost ran me over, I made new friends with the guys that own the taco stand. We're going to give them a shout out on Taco Tuesday this week, so stay tuned for that. But I just be my authentic self of like, hey, fuck you. Turn your headlights on, you asshole. This is a school zone. You almost hit me. I probably yelled twice a year at cars. That was one of them. I made new friends that day.
I wish I had the courage to be more mean. Doesn't that sound weird?
No, I totally get that.
Agreed.
I'm just scared of what's going to happen if I really say the mean thing I really want to say.
On the flip side, though, I think life is hard enough. And why should it be my responsibility to make other people's lives harder by being a dick? Yeah. It takes far more energy for me to yell at that guy than to just continue going about my day. So I don't really see myself changing too much. Although that guy on the train needed a fuck you, buddy. I feel like that, or at least maybe an elbow. I don't know, something.
Quick story. So back when I was breaking up with my abusive husband, we were still living in the same house. In my mind, I wanted to take all of his clothes and literally throw them out the window. So because I just could not be mean enough to do that, I took them all out of the closet on the hangers and laid them on the bed in the other room. I took all of the clothes out of the closet and stacked them neatly on the bed. That was like the most I could actually do. It was almost like I'm trying to be mean and something is stopping me. And it's like, lay the clothes nicely on the bed instead of throwing them out the window like you really want to do. And that's what I did. And of course, he was very upset and angry about it. But they were all on the hangers still, like stacked. So yeah. That's the meanest I could muster in the situation where I was actually one being abused. That was my mean, revenge, awful thing.
Yeah. I feel like the best revenge is a life well lived.
100%.
So
Currently,
true.
I'm crushing that. So suck it, haters.
Your haters are listening. You know they are. They'll never tell you they are, but they're listening.
Oh yeah, they're snooping.
They watch. Oh, that they
They
do.
want to know what's going on.
Oh yeah. They want to see you fail.
Oh, speaking of failed, great segue. Being vulnerable means that when you fail, you own it, right? What's it like for you when you fail? How do you handle failure because you're so great at vulnerability?
I've definitely learned to embrace it. One of my favorite quotes of all time is from Nelson Mandela. He says, I never fail, I only win or I lose. No, sorry. Look at me, I screwed it up. I never fail, I either win or I learn, right?
Ooh,
So
yeah.
that's really how I truly think about failure. And it's taken me a long time to embody it. I'm really okay with it. It is still scary. Am I afraid to fail? Absolutely. But I am immediately going to figure out, what did I do? I need to learn from this situation. So one of my biggest failures, and this is, I actually tell this to when I have job interviews, is I was fired from my job as an executive director. And that was a huge failure. Yeah, there were lots of other things that I can point to that led to me being fired that were out of my control. But ultimately, I still own the parts of it that were under my control. I didn't know what I was doing. I made lots of, bad decisions as a leader. It was my first time ever leading an organization, right? And I allowed the different situations of what the environment was like, the toxic environment, and I made bad decisions. And so it's like I can't even, rationalize my way out of that truth. But it was the best thing that ever happened, because it really enabled me to understand what I needed to do different and how to be a better leader at my next job, which is the job I have now. It helped me. I don't think I would be as good at my job as I am now if I hadn't been so terrible at that job. And I learned from every single thing I did wrong there. I mean, one of the main things that I did wrong, because I'd never been in a leadership position before, was that I allowed personal interactions with staff that were a little bit too personal, right? And it isn't even around, that you slept with somebody or you made out with them. Even sharing certain personal details created this soft boundary that person was then able to use against me, right? So now as a boss, I'm not friends outside of the office with anybody that I work with. And that was a hard lesson I had to learn, because when I was never a boss all through my career, I always would date people at work or flirt with them. And that was always my thing. Like, you're at work with people at work longer than you are with anybody else. What a great dating pool. You know what I mean?
That's where I got my last 2 boyfriends work.
I'm a big fan of don't shit where you eat. But
And I've always done it and never saw a consequence from it until I was fired from my job. So therefore, but all the rest of those years, I did that and never had a consequence. It was always fine. So I was like, yeah, people say that, but it's not bad for me, But yeah, so I had to really learn how to shut that off, to not flirt.
Do you think that's a sign of growth, though? Like realizing, okay, what did I do poorly in this situation to get me fired? Because like in my 20s, I would have been like, XYZ is a bitch, and that's why I got fired. And now I'm like, okay, Kristen, where's your responsibility here?
Yep. For me, part of that is that I practiced Buddhism for 20 years in the past. And one of the main tenets of Buddhism was karma, that anything that happens to you, you've made choices that caused it. So I guess because I'd already been a Buddhist when that happened to me, I already knew that, yes, I did contribute some things to it, because I'd already sort of, that Buddhist philosophy of karma was already something that was ingrained in me. So it made it easier for me to find my own fault in that situation because of it. Where you're right, the average person is I could have, looked, there's tons of people I could blame for that, and they are at fault as well. But that doesn't diminish the part that I played. Like, I know what all those other parts are, but like, you're right, most people will attribute their situation only to external circumstances.
Sure.
That's called the actor-observer bias. There's an actual name for that. The actor-observer bias is a theory that says that whenever something good happens to you, you attribute it to your good qualities. And when something bad happens to you, you attribute it to the situation. The observer bias is whenever something good happens to somebody else, you attribute it to their situation, that they were lucky, that they were fortunate. And when something bad happens to someone else, you attribute it to their character and their choices. So you see, that's the bias that most of us have. We give ourselves the benefit of the doubt and say that other people are just bad decision makers, they're bad people. So.
It's interesting. I mean, this is something that I'm going through now, even like, you know, I got fired from my job at the TV station, and there are days where I'm just like, God, I hate my boss, you know? And then like, even for example, this morning after I worshiped a little bit, I was like, okay, maybe she tried her hardest to keep me. And then powers above her were just like, absolutely no. So it's like, stop putting all of your hate on her and him.
Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to step away from that and be like, okay, maybe they did what they could, or maybe I'm just not up to par really after my injury. There's so many things that have to play that it's not solely their fault, even though inside that's what I want, because it's so easy to blame somebody else, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like every career transition I've made, even leaving one job for another, and I'm an every 3-year cycle, so 15 years of that, I have a push out the door and I have a pull.
Mhm.
And recognizing that those pushes out the door, you know, sometimes God is puts people in your life or puts you in a situation where it was too much for you to handle. Like in that situation, you had to make the right choice, right? God does that to help us grow. But I've always looked at it as it's not this person's fault. Like, yes, I'm in a shitty situation. People could act differently. People could be differently, but it's not a right fit, because if it was a right fit, this wouldn't be so hard.
Right.
And that's really ultimately what made it easy for me to say, okay, the door is closed on this teaching career. You're still going to teach, but in an owner of a gym capacity and as a one-on-one coaching capacity. And as that door closed, everyone said to me when I moved out here, why don't you open another gym? I'm like, well, I did that already. Like, what do you do next? Like manage a gym? Like, well, you can't really go up from there. And it was wonderful and I loved it, but it felt like God said, this door is closed and we're not going to try it 3 more times.
Right.
And it was I did some personal training. I did CrossFit Kids classes and it was all right, we're done. And so I'm in that situation again where there's some pushes and there's some pulls. And it's been on my heart since I left my business, to have a new business. And teaching, coaching people is one-on-one is really that's the same passion and that same purpose of loving people and serving people
Exactly.
that I'm able to do in that way.
But imagine if
that you
you
said
had
that.
attached your identity to being a gym owner. You'd still be trying to do it right now. So thank goodness you embrace this idea that you can reinvent yourself and use the same skills, that desire to teach people, doesn't have to be in a gym. It can be as a coach, right? A coach of people in their careers, in their lives. So
yeah, I had asked our guest a couple weeks ago, I had asked Andrea, what's it like she said she has no passions outside of her 10-year-old self. Like and everything she does today is what she was doing at 10 years old. I'm actually not that different. And I thought about it after our podcast. I was like, wow, I owned a club and I charged dues and I had all this entrepreneur stuff going on. I also was a teacher and the only child. I taught all the stuffed animals and all the kids in the neighborhood. I was tutoring. And so it makes sense. And then I was always giving relationship advice because no one wanted to date me. So
Oh, stop.
I'm kidding. I had a long-term boyfriend in high school and we were celibate.
That's sweet.
I gave great advice. Don't get pregnant.
yeah, that's good advice.
It's fantastic advice. Speaking of advice, Kristen loves to ask people about advice.
Yes. What is something that you would tell your younger self?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would definitely tell my younger self to stop factoring in your partner, your significant other's opinion into your life choices. Like, stop trying to please that person over your own needs. And that's something I probably wouldn't have listened to, because when I was 20 something, I thought I knew everything, right? So
Or don't we all?
I would tell my younger self that. Would my younger
Girl,
self,
you don't know shit.
probably not. My younger self probably would not have listened to it. So maybe something better I should have told my younger self that they would have listened to is buy this stock, because this many years it's going to be worth a lot of money.
Buy Apple.
So that's probably much more practical advice to go back and give your younger self, or even just save money, right? I was so terrible at saving.
Oh my God, I know.
And again, I probably wouldn't have listened to that either. So,
Give the extra loan money back, Kristen. What are you have to pay that back.
Hey, don't take out that student loan. You know?
My parents are really good about making sure that I did not take that extra loan. Like, we will come up with a couple extra grand.
Yeah, yeah.
Someone will hook on the street or something, but we will find this money. You're
I
not.
was the opposite. We were so broke. I told my son, maybe we take out the loan. And my son was like, yeah, Mom, I don't think I want to. Okay. So he actually was the voice of reason, because I was like, I don't have any money, so you can't take the loan. So he didn't go back to school because he didn't want to take out the loan. So good on him.
Yeah. So when you talk about your younger self and that relationship advice, during the time of Corona, I feel like a lot of people, if not everyone, is going to be examining their current relationships in the time of quarantine.
Pregnant or divorced, either one. I don't know.
So I'm not going to get pregnant and I can't get divorced.
That's true.
I was hoping to see, if I could make it through quarantine, we could make it through maybe everything. We'll see.
Play in this. I have to write this play. I have to write this. I'm a writer too.
Is that the plan for quarantine?
I have to write a quarantine play.
That'd be amazing.
Set for a play. One apartment and the things that a couple goes through.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm in a long distance relationship and my boyfriend's annoying the shit out of me. And I know he'll probably listen because he's very supportive. I'm just like, I need a time out for you. He's like, we're not even in the same city. I'm like, you're a lot.
Time out from you.
I love you, but please stop talking to me for at least a couple hours.
You guys aren't even in the same time zone, but you need a team
I know.
from each other. Well, I don't feel that way, but
you guys are very new, Katie. You guys are in the I love each other phase.
What a great place to be in the time of quarantine.
That's a great place to be. Mm-hmm.
Was it you that said you were going to write something called Love in the Time of Corona?
Love in the Time of Corona, yes, but no one was getting the reference of Love in the Time of Cholera. Like, people don't read anymore, so they didn't get the reference.
Well, the people who read will read it. Like, I read all the time. I've been reading so much during the time of Corona. Like, I'd read that book.
You'd read Love in the Time of Corona?
I would totally read it.
I would.
Let's do a long form essay.
I feel like I have to make something up. Like, my story is not that exciting.
Oh, everybody does that. Just write it.
Like, what happens to the protagonist in this story?
It doesn't even have to be.
Maybe you end up being happy. Does it have to be bad?
There you go.
You end up being, in my story, it does. This is how my mind works. In my mind, this is not going to work out.
That to be the start.
It's going to work out. I'm sick of talking you off the ledge every day. She'll be like, oh my God, this. I'm like, he's great. Like, stop talking.
I think we're fine now. I think anxiety is cooled. We're good. I'm fine. My friend Jess is pregnant and she's due in September. And she's like, well, we'll worry about that when it comes time to September because we don't know what the life is going to look like. I'm like, that seems reasonable. I could probably do that about my own life. I'll worry about shit in September.
Yeah, worry about it then.
In the now.
Right. But relationships and like giving up your apartment is scary.
But it wasn't yours.
It's exciting.
Another way to look at it.
It's a nice next step. Just because you're giving up your place doesn't mean you're giving up you.
You haven't seen my place. It's a great fucking place. Veronica's seen my place.
It's amazing.
You're gaining something else. You're gaining
a roommate.
A relationship.
It's not really yours anyway.
And a dog. A really great dog. You know what? You're right. It's worth it. I'm fine.
Veronica, thank you so much for coming on. You've been amazing. But before we get off, I want to ask you one more quick question.
Sure.
How do you keep your authentic self?
How do I keep my authentic self? I really think it just has to do with the fact that I've seen the benefits of it, right? So with anything, if it's incentivized in some way, you're going to keep doing it. And what I've seen come from me being as authentic as possible is that people trust me. They extend kindness and generosity to me because they see me as somebody who is trustworthy and who has integrity. So it has a tremendous amount of benefit to me in my personal life and in my work life. You build a certain amount of capital that you can spend when you need it with someone when they've already seen you to be trustworthy and honest. Then you know when you have to go to that person and ask for something, you've built up enough trust that they will do it for you. And I need that. So as a person who is a Black woman, so that I'm vulnerable to society in so many ways. I'm LGBTQ, I'm a dark-skinned Black woman, not just a Black woman. I'm a dark-skinned Black woman with African features. There's so many ways that I am disadvantaged that all of the cultural and whatever capital I can engender myself, the better, right? All of that helps me. So that's why I can stay authentic and real, is because it works for me. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. I love having your friendship. You are always so honest with me. There's several times where I've called Veronica and she's like, hey, I just want to tell you this is how it made me feel and of course, I love you and it wasn't my intention.
It's scary for me to say it though, because I always feel bad, but I'm like, I know I have to just tell her the truth though.
Yeah.
Katie responds well when you tell the truth. Because sometimes, even this podcast, I've called her, I'm like, listen, this isn't going to work for me. You're nuts.
Love it.
Like, let's work through this. I'm like, okay.
Now you know why every man will eventually leave me.
That's not true. That is not true.
They've just got to be able to say, listen, you're nuts. And then
But that's why you tell them that on the first date. My first date questions are like, please go away if you can't handle this kind of question.
Yeah.
What's your
first date with a white guy? No, wait, let me tell you. If I'm on a first date with a white guy, this is the question he's going to get. So how do you use your white privilege for good? That's a first date question for me. If we can't answer that question right, we can't date. And if it's just even a black man, if it's a black man, it's not going to be a race question. It's going to be a sex question. So, how do you use your male privilege to help women? What do you think about feminism? Like, I'm on it. Like, first date, you're going to know that I'm going to be intense. And if you can handle that, if you want a second date with me, we're good. I'm going to ask you the stupid, what's your favorite color questions on the second date. Get what I'm saying?
I hear you. So first date, I'm going to crack a lot of jokes. I'm going to be weird. That's why I had a lot of first dates on the apps.
Hey, look, that's why if that's the second date, I know that guy wants to deal with me.
I think first date, I'm always like pretty open. Like I've always been like, I'm never going to be the girl that's like, I'm not hungry or no, I don't eat carbs. I'm like, hook me up with a pizza. I'm going to get half of your food too. Like I'm never going to be that woman. Like even sometimes when I argue with my boyfriend, he's like, you're intense. I'm like, you knew what you were getting into. I was always upfront. Like, it's too late now. We've been dating for almost 2 years. Like you're fully ingrained. Like you knew what you were getting into. You knew what kind of woman I was. It's just, I'm never going to be like, can I have a side salad, please? Never. Yeah. And so I just think being upfront like that is just so important, especially when you first start dating.
Yeah, I agree. We should teach girls that. Like, we should stop trying to be the little thing on the first date. No, be your most intense self on the first date. Then over time, be like, oh, she's not as intense as she was that first time.
This is the opposite advice that I've ever been given, which was, hey, Eads, like maybe you should ease them into you. I'm like, all right.
No.
Well, I think that attracts the partner you want, right? Because I was like this with Darren, who's my partner, the whole time. And now I'm left with this man who loves me, thinks I'm funny, loves that, he's very supportive, like minority communities. He's a white man and like understands like he has privilege, but so it's like I'm with this man who gets me, loves me, and supports me. Before, like, I dated a man, he was a very nice man, but didn't think I was funny because I did that. I like eased myself in. Mm-hmm. And if I was Kristen straight from the beginning, he might have been like, okay, you know what? This is too much for me. We could have cut our losses much earlier instead of 3 years later in so much pain.
Yeah. I always have been myself with people I've actually dated, like the apps, whatever, right? I don't really understand how these people actually meet on these things. But like when I met my ex-husband, I was myself. I ran away from him in college. That was my first reaction. He followed me back to my dorm room. I ran away. Honestly, I should have stuck with that.
He followed you back to your dorm room? No.
Yeah, after we met at a bar.
Little stalky.
My roommate had made out with him before, and she said he was a really bad kisser. She was right. So,
so many red flags.
So many red flags.
You can't you can't teach someone to be a good kisser.
No, I've tried.
Yeah, and like, what are they doing? I don't understand.
It's either the full face or the like. Oh God, it's disgusting.
The video is essential for this podcast, obviously.
Obviously, but I just don't understand. Like, what are you doing with the things and the stuff? Like, whatever. Like, I'm 30 and I'm wiping my mouth off.
That's disgusting.
What is happening? But anyway, I was always myself. What red flag I ignored was when he started saying things like, I love you. I think you're funny. I think you're great. But my friends don't. And so here's what we need to do about it.
No.
That was the red flag I ignored. So I was always myself. He just didn't like me. Whoops, like he thought he did. I think he thought, yeah.
I feel like I've seen like opposite red flags. You know, when you're getting treated right, Katie, you do this all the time and you're like scared and you're like, this is not, something is wrong here.
Yeah.
Like Darren thinks I'm funny or he knows faith is important to me. So he's going to come to church and I didn't even push him. And I'm like, okay, God, this man is too perfect. Like what is happening here? And that's when I like pull away when I think like they're too great. Like what's happening? This doesn't happen often. This is the only time this has happened with the man.
Yeah.
Typically, I'm like, okay, this man's a psychopath. Get me out of here. And then I stay for 3 years. So it's totally different. Fucked up shit.
Yeah.
Same. I always thought that strategy is like, well, do I want to date 3 different losers or just the same loser for 3 years? That was my strategy.
Totally.
And then I decided I was not gonna date losers. I gave that up in the tens. Is that what we call that now? The tens? No.
Oh, the 2000s?
Yeah.
The 10s?
No.
The 10s. I like the 10s better,
Like
honestly.
2010 to 2020. Isn't that the tens? What do we?
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Sure, we just made it a thing, the 10s.
All right. So I gave up dating losers in the tens.
Hmm.
I started dating tens in the 20s. I'm okay. I'm lost in this analogy.
Okay.
Miss 100% of shots you don't take. All right, one last question for Veronica, and then we're also going to plug her nonprofit for our nonprofit of the week, the Jubilee Center in Hoboken. They're doing amazing things for families. They are currently in need of computers, printer paper, printers, school supplies, things of that nature. We will have a place where you can donate for the Jubilee Center. The last question of the day, Veronica, it's probably the most important question we're going to ask you. What's your favorite cocktail?
Mm.
I'm simple. I'm a mimosa.
A mimosa.
Ooh, classic, but still gets you drunk.
There you go.
Sweet
Perfectly
and
bottomless.
bubbly, just like you.
Thank you. So wonderful to meet you, Kristen.
I know. When I visit Katie, we'll have to all get drinks.
Absolutely. We'll get
Yes.
mimosas and palomas.
Yeah, mine is a Paloma. I love it.
And I'll drink whatever everyone else is drinking because I'm a people pleaser.
I love you. Love you.
Bye, Veronica. Thank you.
It was so nice to meet you. You're amazing.